Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramon, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
BrainShare Business Mentors proudly presents BrainShare.us, the ultimate business education platform, delivering the proven systems, processes, tools, and knowledge that empower you to build the business of your dreams. With 13 high-powered courses encompassing over 240 lessons accessed online on your schedule. Running a business is the hardest thing you'll ever do. We've helped thousands of business owners gain the leadership, communication, and business skills needed to build the business of their dreams. We can help you. Choose your learning path. Scuba Squad is the premier membership program for today's business leaders with access to all BrainShare material and double our money-back guarantee. BrainShare Basics, the ultimate business framework course, a hard-hitting 13-week program to lay the necessary foundation to build the business of your dreams. Or take individual courses as you need them. Every course has dozens of lessons, with video, practical exercises, precise documentation, and the opportunity for direct feedback from a BrainShare mentor. All programs have our exclusive 30-day money-back guarantee. No questions asked, don't wait. Choose your path and start today.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business in life with a purpose, serving others and achieving success. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to learn how to do business and live life to make an impact in the world. As you're listening to my incredible guests today, how will you serve today? And what impact will you create from that service today? I want to thank my two sponsors, BrainShare.us. Build a business that works without you. Discover how to create a self-sustaining business that thrives even in your absence. You can have a business that doesn't tie you down. We'll guide you through the steps to build an enterprise to operate smoothly without your constant oversight. Visit BrainShare.us to learn how to set the foundations for a business that stands the test of time. With BrainShare Business Mentors, you can build a business that works without you. And PitchDB.com. Successfully connect with over 11,000 conferences to speak at, 3 million podcasts to be a guest at, and build your thought leader platform and your expertise to scale your business. Remember, your network is your net worth. And I'm fired up today because I always talk about the people asset business. We need people, but what's the next step? We need sales. You can have 10 million people. If you get 0 sales, you're still a bankrupt company. Doesn't matter how many people you have. And my expert and incredible guest, Mark, is going to talk about that. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks so much. It's my pleasure to be here. I look forward to talking to you today.
This is going to be great because we talk sales, and there's so many people out there talking about sales. But let's dive in with you. What does sales mean to you?
Wow, what does sales mean to me? Nice open-ended question to start with. Sales to me is revenue, and what I do is I'm a fractional chief revenue officer, right? So you have salespeople because you want to take the expertise in your product or service that you're pushing and be able to tell the masses about it. What's the best way to do that? Of course, there's a marketing component to each organization too, but from a sales perspective, you have to have people who are engaged with your product or service and understand exactly what it's there for and how to talk to the general public about it and explain the need and why they need it. So that's what I've spent my career doing, is working with people to understand what they're best at, working with them with their own voice to be able to pitch the ideas with the operation or company that they're working for to be able to grow their revenue.
Almost forgot about the revenue part. That is quite important. The sales leads to revenue. So you took the third step, which I love. What do you think of the clients you work with and people you've talked to is the biggest challenge in sales?
Wow. I'm honestly, it probably starts with the hiring aspect. I think hiring the right people, making sure you're fishing in the right ponds right out of the gate is by far the most important piece. I can't tell you how many companies I've seen that have a very stringent way they want to look at hiring people. I came from the healthcare space, Steve, and in the post-acute space, working in home health, hospice, and palliative care, people say, no, I'm going to hire somebody who has a full book of business and I'm going to bring them in. They're going to hit the ground running and they're going to grow my company just like they said they did in the previous two that they worked for. It typically doesn't work that way. So hiring the right people and hiring with the right attitude as far as will versus skill is a very important determining factor. So I'm very big on getting it right up front. If you have to use a professional service to do so, it's going to be worth it rather than burning through two or three different people before you actually found the one.
Yeah. It's interesting too. Healthcare, how did you get into healthcare? I wanted to ask you, but healthcare is one of those industries, it's got a bad rap, maybe for a reason we're not going to get into that because that's not what this show is about. But talk about a hard sell is healthcare. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting component because I always use hospice as an example when I talk about this, Steve. So when you're a hospice representative or a hospice account manager, and you're going out to talk to people about hospice and educating them on exactly what your company can do and how they can serve the potential patients, is when you think about the process, it's a representative talking to a doctor, a nurse, a case manager at a nursing home about a service that is intangible, dealing with somebody typically passing away within 6 months' time when they're hospice appropriate. So you're not talking to the end user; you're talking to a middle person and educating them on exactly what we can do. You take that with the fact that in the area I came from, which was Dallas, Texas, when I was doing most of my professional healthcare work, in the Dallas County area alone, there was 250 different hospices. So really taking the time to be able to differentiate yourself and create those relationships with the middleman to be able to access those patients at the end, it's quite a task. It's not an easy build.
And that's a big thing that you mentioned about the 240 hospice locations. Competition,
Yes,
sales and competition. That's a whole elephant in the room right there. Talk about that.
it is. What's fun about that is, again, it goes back to the hiring aspect, right? When you talk to somebody about this, you have to paint not a bleak picture, but you have to scare them a little bit, right? You want to make sure that they have the wherewithal to be able to do this because this is not an easy job in healthcare. Most of the people, the success rate for the reps who are pretty good, a success rate is about 8%. So think about it. If you're going to go out and make 100 calls in a given week, you're going to get kicked in the teeth 92 times. But you know what? You have to have a thick skin, and you have to celebrate the 8% wins that you do get, and help build your organization that way. And a lot of it does go into painting the right picture for the perfect patient that your company can be able to serve and help. There's a lot more than just talking to somebody about, do you have anybody who's nearing the end of their life? It's a much more strategic picture painting process to make that happen.
Yeah, talk about emotional sales alone are emotional. Selling your fiance or your girlfriend to marry your boyfriend to well, it's the girlfriend. That's a
Right.
sale. But when you get into healthcare, talk about emotions, especially hospice, because you're talking about death. Now it adds to the level of emotion, right? How do you navigate that?
It makes me, let me tell you a little quick story, and it relates
Yeah,
directly to this.
please.
So when I was in Dallas, I hired this one young lady who lived in the Plano area to take over that market for us. She was exceptionally good at what she did. She had the passion. She was a really good salesperson and created really great relationships. After about 5 months, her communication started to wane off a little bit, and I noticed that. So I started to reach out to her right about the start of month 6, and said, I'm not feeling that you are, totally engaged anymore. Let's have a conversation about it. And she ended up coming into the office and said, I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm having a really, really hard time separating my personal life from my work life and being with a patient's family as they're tearing up and they sign patients up for hospice and they're right near the end of their life was taking a really big toll on this person emotionally. And a couple of weeks later, she ended up resigning, and I wished her nothing but the best of luck because I know how hard that job can be and what toll it can take on people. So when you're talking about training, you have to have somebody who has the will, not a skill, but a will to be able to do that type of work and the ability to separate personal from professional and leave that all at the door when you go home at night. It's a very difficult dichotomy that people have to really make happen a lot of times to be able to do that, to be successful in a business.
I love that story because you just gave the other component of a servant heart. With servant heart, I'm going to serve, help, support all these people, but you're also supporting her by letting her go because she could have stayed
Absolutely.
there and you could have maybe affected her health. I'm kind of projecting here, but it's not going to be good if she stayed. And you recognize that and said, yeah, it's going to put a burden on you because you got to fill that spot eventually. And they're going to be, but it's more about the people, again, people assets in the hiring part, which I'm glad you mentioned.
Yeah, and but that case, it wasn't about me. It was about the well-being of somebody else who was on the team, right? And that goes back to leading with a servant's heart.
Yeah.
I get into this to be able to make people better at what they do, and if I can help them separate the personal from the professional as well, and leave it at the door. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And no matter how good you think you are at doing something like that, it doesn't matter what you think. It matters what's the mental capacity of the person to be able to be able to do that.
And it's interesting when we first met, you pointed right up to that servant heart like you just did, like 30 seconds in, he's a guest. Because, I'm in that
Perfect.
world, you are too, and I love it. But we don't realize outside that world, there's not a lot of servant hearts. There's a lot of takers, a lot of, corruption and scamming and all that, or pitching, as our friend Clay Hicks says, pitch slapping. Shout out to
That's right.
to Clay. And that's not the way to sell. Yeah, as I say, that short-term money, that lasts for a few weeks, few months. Don't you want that client for 5 years?
Yep.
That you're helping
You
and continue paying you and all that. And I love that. So let's take that. Why is leading with a servant's heart so important to you?
I wasn't even 100% sure I had it until I got into healthcare. So I owe healthcare a lot. When I started, I moved to Dallas. I was in a different industry altogether, and I kind of fell into the healthcare space. So there was a charity golf tournament going on. There was a healthcare company that was sponsoring a team. And my spouse at the time asked me if I'd be interested in playing because they had an open spot. I said, sure, I'd be happy to. So I jumped in there and happened to be paired with a gentleman named Tony Rex, who was the VP of sales for a long-term acute care hospital system in Dallas. And I got to ride with him and talk to him for probably 4.5, 5 hours on a golf course, which is the best way to sell and market anything, by the way, is on a golf course. So
yes, amen.
I got to know him at the very end of the round. He said, have you ever thought about doing healthcare sales? And at that time, I don't even think I could spell healthcare. It was quite a long time ago. But I said, I'd be interested in talking more. So we then interviewed on a professional basis. And, I was the first non-clinician hired within this organization to be able to pursue sales for a long-term acute care hospital. It then built and built and built. And as soon as I got into healthcare, I found it affecting me in many different ways. When I was a young pup in the market, I used to smoke cigarettes. And after getting into this and dealing with specifically a lot of respiratory patients, doing assessments for ventilator dependent ICU patients in hospitals after being in healthcare for 6 months, and talking to people who a conversation that should have taken 5 minutes takes 30 because it's so hard to catch the breath, from previous smokers. And I remember having the conversation just like that at a very specific hospital in Arlington, Texas, and walking out to my car and taking the cigarettes and crumbling them up, throwing them in the trash, and I quit. And that was just one thing that really affected me. Getting to know these patients and families, because not all of them pull through, and seeing what happens with these people and how much support they actually need, especially if it's an elderly couple with one in the hospital and no other family around, to be able to take a little time to sit with them and just listen, hear about the history of the couple and when they got married and what they've been through together and where they've moved and what their kids have done, and etc. It's very powerful. And I think that's when I first really developed or realized the level of empathy that I did have. And that just made me want to serve people and help people as much as I could. That mentality was born early on in my healthcare career, and it just kind of expanded over time. I realized that, when I got out of just being a rep and I started in leadership, I realized that I can not only help patients and patients' families, but I can work with the other people within the organization I worked for as far as really serving them to make them better. And that was the piece I think I love most about getting into management, is taking people who are good and making them great at what they do, and that by serving them, that's how they get there. And I still talk to many people that have worked for me 10 years ago. I keep in touch with them to this day. It's very rewarding.
That's the power of serving. You said something I just wrote down that kind of got glossed over. I want to bring back up. You went from rep to leadership. And that's with sales reps. Mentor, learn to be a good leader. And if you could be a servant leader, more is going to come your way. But how important is that? You know, guy's there, he works at Google and he's selling, you know, outselling Google. He's one of 1,000, 10,000 sales guys. He's going to you, Mark. How do I be a leader? I'm really just a sales rep.
Mm. So dealing with people who are highly successful can be a little bit difficult too. And you said use Google as an example. You know, most of my history has been in the healthcare space, but what I do now makes me totally industry agnostic as well. But I find when I was able to get into leadership for the first time, it was scary. I mean, I walked into my first meeting that I had to lead. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You know, so it took me a minute to really kind of figure it out. But I mean, I was able to find my stride pretty quickly. And, you know, being able to work with people and really engaging people in the meetings and the people that I work with to say, you know, here's what I'd like to cover today. What are your thoughts? Or give me an example of when this has happened to you. So just engaging people and getting them involved in what I want to cover to try to improve what people do every day. And the meetings that are set for an hour usually ended up running an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, just because the conversation opened up so much and everybody was throwing in ideas to make each other better. And it's powerful, and it just really lends to, it makes the servant heart person smile, you know, to be able to see people want to grow and want to get better at what they do. I think that's the old adage of most people don't leave companies, they leave leaders is 100% true. And I think that, you know, my goal is to take the people who report to me and make them better at what they do. And hopefully they want to stay and continue to work for me.
Yeah, I like that because you said something again. I just, you're so humble, and I love your attitude, the servant's heart. But we all have that first time we had to lead. Everybody, your first day leading, whatever that is, you're going to have that. But like what you said, you got going really quick. And if you're not going really quick, build your personal development. That's a way to grow, to be a better leader. You and me kind of went a little faster than most. Time is the ally, not a non-ally. I can't think the other word. But what's interesting too is clients. Okay. What is your idea of a perfect client to work with?
Good. I'm glad you added that, because if you didn't, I was going to. So there's an ideal client from a, you know, bullet points on a page perspective, but then there's a client you actually want to work with. Those are very different people. So from my perspective, from what I do now, being the chief revenue officer and a solopreneur, as one of my friends called me, a so-sopreneur. Hopefully it was just in fun. I need to ask him about that now that I think about it. But,
yes, you do.
He's another person that partners me with sales acceleration, but it was a pretty good line. I have to admit. So, and I'm sorry, I just got off track. What was the question again?
We were talking about that perfect client to work with.
My perfect client to work with is very specific. So it's going to be a post-startup client who still has some seed money to be able to help grow their sales feature within the company to probably 60 or so $1 million. That seems to be the sweet spot for somebody who needs the fractional help the most. They manufacture a great widget, or they have a incredible service, but maybe they're an engineer by background, or they have a different background. Maybe it's a financial background and they just don't understand the sales component or don't know how to grow. You know, I'm talking to a potential client right now out of Texas who is looking at adding sales team members, but they don't even know what type of person they need. So I applauded this gentleman for reaching out and talking about it before he just went and made a hire for the person he thinks he needs versus, you know, who we might need. Is it inbound versus outbound dialing? Is it an account manager, or is it a true hunter who's going to go out there and generate leads and bring in income from investors? So it's a very different animal as far as that goes. And there's no right answer. So the range would be, you know, maybe 1 or 2 million to about 60. If they have a sales team or even a sales leader in place, not a problem, even better. because typically they still see a need. They think they have the right person, but maybe this person isn't trained up enough. Maybe their background wasn't in sales, or they've never been through a leadership course. I can do everything from mentor somebody, even a CEO or a sales leader, one-on-one for an hour a week, to coming in and doing a full-blown sales infrastructure build, which is about a 4-month process with the company, just to really show them what the art of the possible is. The perfect client would also be somebody who realizes that if they don't make a change, that they're going to grow stagnant. I mean that from a perspective of a startup all the way up to a company that may do 40 million in sales, but they just can't get over that hump and they can't understand how. Typically, when you bring in a fractional, which is, as it sounds, a fraction of the cost of hiring somebody full time, and it's only an engagement for a predetermined amount of time. Those people who say, yes, I need to change. And one question I always do ask is, if you do nothing different right now, what is your organization going to look like a year from now? And that really makes people think. Most people sit back in their chair and go, wow, I've never thought about it that way. Or I can't wait a year to do this. My business is fledgling. I'm losing sales. I lost my top salesperson. Whatever the situation might be, as a fractional, I can come in and have some solutions that are going to be able to get the organization back on track.
That I like. That is very easy. So you're telling me you don't take everybody on as a client?
No, absolutely not. So there's been a few people I've talked to that I was absolutely no. One prospective client I was talking to in November, actually. I said I laid out the framework for what the groundwork for what they needed. It was a 4-month engagement, so it was pretty intensive build because they really didn't have any sales structure whatsoever. They had 2 salespeople, but they had no quotas. They didn't know if they were compensating their people in the right fashion. So I gave them a 4-month plan in writing for a scope of work with all the deliverables that I could do for them. And all of a sudden the people started picking up, well, what if I took this one out? What would the price be then? What if I took these 2 things out? What's the price then? Well, I have to run this by my 3 bosses and I'll get back to you in 2 weeks. So I can't even count the number of red flags that went up during that 1 hour that 1 hour Zoom meeting. But yeah, I mean, there is a client, and then there is a perfect client or a good client to be able to work with. Those are 2 very different words. And even though my background was in healthcare, I really am industry agnostic now for the tools I have and what I'm able to do.
I'm going to say this: a la carte only works in buffet. If you need
exactly
something, right, that's where it should stay. You go to your buffet in Vegas, that's where you can pick and choose what you want. If you want your business to grow, Mark is the way of doing it because he's giving you the playbook of what to do. Let's think of sports. That football team, they take 2 plays out, it could affect the whole game.
Yep, true.
And then you spend a lot of money. You go, hey, Mark, it didn't work. Well, you didn't do this, this, and this because you took it out. I love that. And that's what a servant heart does. Servant heart takes away and says, you're just not a fit for me because you're serving them because it's not going to work, and you're serving you because it's not going to work. Go ahead.
It's funny you said that too. The sports analogy, the football analogy, hit it right in the head because I'm an avid football fan. I am a University of Georgia alum. I had to throw that plug in. Sorry about that. But every team, professional or college, when they come out, they have the first 12, 15 plays scripted, right? They have done that ahead of time. That's all part of the game plan. Offenses come out and they start clicking right away in most cases because of the scripted plays, right? It's how they adapt after they get out of that script that really shows the true professionalism and coaching talent within an organization or within a team. Is okay, now you've done this, you're being very robotic because you planned this all out. Now, how are you going to adjust to actual live game action? And I think that a lot of people think they have a script that works as far as their sales go. Well, this is the way we've always done it, so this works. But you know what? You got here, but then you just stop.
Yeah,
you're not going to get here unless you bring somebody in to maybe from outside the organization to say, you've always done this. Why haven't you tried this? Or let's look at doing this instead. And it's the old analogy about, you can't see the forest through the trees, right? People are maybe too busy working in their business versus on it, have a different perspective. That's why bringing in somebody from the outside for, a month or a couple months or whatever it looks like, could be a really, really strong solution to help you grow.
Yeah, no, this is so great. I want to thank you for being on, but before I forget, you got something, a servant heart does this, you got something free for the audience.
I do. Absolutely, I do. So, one of the things that we do as an organization for me, for both Specialist Sales Solutions, powered, and I also work with Sales Acceleration, powered by Sales Access, I call it, is we have created a sales agility assessment. It's a link that will be embedded, I believe, on the YouTube channel from you, Part Steve. So thank you for doing that.
Yep.
But what I wanted to give anybody out there, a small, medium-sized business owner, the option to do is click on the link, and it takes about 10 minutes to complete. It's truly an amazing tool, and this is a tool that thousands of small to medium-sized business owners have used. So all the data compiled within this assessment tool, you're compared against. So when I have people do this, I've had probably 12 people take it this year already, and people are amazed their scores. Oh my God, my score is a 48 out of 100. I'm terrible. No, you're not terrible at all. Okay, but you're compared to the thousands of other people that have done this. It just shows that you realize there's room for improvement. The coolest part about that link too, Steve, is when you take it within 5 minutes of completing it, so 10 minutes to take it, 5 minutes later, you'll have a full scorecard in your own email account, in your own inbox. And it'll give you a score from 0 to 100, and it'll break down the 10 sections for the 10 questions. And then if you were deficient in one area, it gives you very, very detailed data on different fixes and different things you can actually do. So it's not going to rope you into anything. I'm not going to blow up your phone and call you 3 times a week until you answer the phone if I ask you to take this, but it'll give you a good insight. And then if there's a need to follow up, I look forward to following up with anybody who would like to talk more.
That's fantastic. That's giving you something free that could help your business and teach you something, educate you on your business. I'm all for it. Assessments for free got me in, so I love it. How can people
Perfect.
reach out to you, Mark?
There's a couple ways. Easiest way is always email. I'm happy to also send you a link to my website too, Steve, if you'd like to put that on the YouTube channel as well. My email address is mspencer, for Mark Spencer, at salesacceleration.com. The one caveat, when you're spelling out sales acceleration, it's SALESXCEL. There's not the E in acceleration in between. So if you're reaching out to me directly, that's the one caveat there. I'm also free to be able to text and receive phone calls. So my cell phone number is 817-907-2723. I'll reach out and contact anybody in whatever way is easiest for them.
That's fantastic. I'll put that all in the show notes. And again, thank you for being such an incredible host. And sales is a tough, it's not tough, but we make it tough because that thing that sits on top of our neck causes us problems. And
Yes, it does.
in this show, and I say this with podcasts, it's something my mantra now. There's a reverse and a forward button in a podcast. That's why I love them. You could take 5 or 10 minutes of this show and listen to it back and forth of what Mark said. These could be $1 million tips to help you get out of, debt, make your company grow to scale, as he said. So use those buttons. Me and Mark would love for you to listen to the whole show, but I'm sure he'd agree with me. Go, hey, if 5 minutes or 10 minutes of this show changes your life, we're 1,000,000% behind that. So
Absolutely.
listen or watch the whole show, but if you find parts that are really important, go back to that. Now you're taking the elephant one bite at a time, and you're really getting benefit from this podcast. Don't forget about my TV show, Together We Serve, every Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Podcast swag. Who wants a t-shirt, a long sleeve shirt, a hat, a hoodie, doing business with a servant's heart? Spread that message out to the world. And I want to thank you all, as I always say, for listening or watching this episode. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.